Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So we have both interpreters here? Yes, we do. Anita and Kat. Okay, thank you. Well, I'll get started here. Hello, everyone. I'm Representative Robin Comey. I represent the 102nd District, and we are so glad you could join us this morning for our, I believe this is our third meeting of our, let's see what our formal title that we were calling it, the work group, the concerning issues affecting deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind persons. Thank you, Heather, for setting up all these, the links and the calendar invites. And thank you, everyone, for being here. We're going to, at this meeting, discuss our higher education and workforce development. We'll hear a presentation, a guest presenter from the UConn school. And Kathy, I want to introduce my co-chairs here. Do we think Representative Abercrombie and Representative Fusco that we need to do a reintroduction of folks that are here?
No, I think you can go right into the meeting, just go over the minutes from the September meeting to see if anybody has any changes. And then I think unless Representative Fusco has any other thoughts, we can go right into the presentation. Thank you, Representative.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm ready to go.
Okay, wonderful. So we did receive, Heather did send out Christina's meeting summary from the last meeting. Very thorough. Thank you for Christina for putting those together. That meeting, the earlier meeting from the August meeting was on, or from the September meeting, excuse me, was on interpreter standards. Is there any, I'm hoping you all had a chance to take a look at it. Is there any comments or corrections, misunderstandings about what was written?
This is Harvey. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. I did just want to mention that we had a really good discussion on that first part of the interpreter standards. There was a lot of discussion explaining why, some reasonings behind things, a really good discussion. The second part, we actually ran out of time before we got through the proposal of interpreter standard board. And so I did want to mention that that was one of the reasons why our friend, Kathy Abercrombie, mentioned to us about this group back in March. And that's why we wanted to have a work group discussion on that. So if we could potentially find some time to discuss that, I just wanted to bring up a friendly reminder that we agreed to have that discussion. And so if we wanted to do it now or at the next meeting, that doesn't matter to me, but I did want to have a discussion on that topic. Thank you.
So Representative Comey, if I could comment on that. Harvey, I think that the discussion around the standards board was if we thought that this would be a good time to have one. And I think that the chairs of this working group feel that at this point, it isn't something financially we would look at as a state. I don't want to speak for the other two co-chairs because I was not at the September meeting, but I think the thought was that if that was something that would be coming up in the future, we would talk about that later on. But I think we were really trying to talk about the criteria that's used for interpreters, what's happening with the RFP for the groups that have come into the state, and then also the educational piece we heard was a big piece of it. So I'm not sure, truthfully, if there's going to be time because we really have blocked off the next 3 meetings before session starts. Our timeline is really tight. So I think that we can, if there's time, have a conversation, but I don't want to promise something that I don't believe that we're going to have the ability to fulfill. If my other two co-chairs want to add anything to that from your thoughts, that would be great.
No, I thank you for that, Representative Abercrombie. And I on your leadership, as far as that board goes, I obviously agree with you. I don't know that we would have the time if we wanted to put something like that together for future legislation, at least in February. But I don't want to put Harvey on its heels. That is certainly not to say that we are against, having that board or having that commission. I just think right now it's not something that's not going to happen. And I'm more than happy to have conversations about that. We could get into it. We can go down a rabbit hole now right now and talk all day about that. I think my concern is that my conversation moving forward would be about looking perhaps to see what other options we have other than the board. If it's something that we can't do in the next, couple of years, then maybe we should come up with, some other plans, contingency plans to figure out how we can fulfill those needs without having to actually go to the legislature and put together a board. I thank you for those comments. I appreciate it.
And I will say also that some of the thoughts that we were having is to see how Alvin, we've expanded some of his work hours and his full-time capacity, see how that goes, see if we can start directing more of our constituent services and to Alvin, and make sure that he's identifying what might be needed in the future, and see how that sort of movement has gone, and then also to focus on readjusting the existing work group, the advisory group, to be more subject matter driven and help out in that way. Jeff?
Yes. So first of all, I do want to thank everyone simply for the discussion and the clarification on this topic. I do want to thank you for sharing that. The OLR, in terms of the legalese, the research report, that was actually very helpful for me. I admit when reading through it, that there is no other state agency that has a board of individuals. That actually helped me understand this matter a little bit more. In terms of what I read about Maryland, there is a state policy framework to address fraudulent and unqualified interpreters within the state. I'm wondering if our legislators, maybe if they have better access, can we find that policy in its exact current status and see if maybe this could answer many of the issues and the concerns that are brought up by the community? That's just one suggestion I have. Thank you.
Excellent.
Do you want me to take that
sure.
comment from Jeff? So Jeff, we would be more than happy. I'm sorry, I hate when the screen moves around because then I lose people. Jeff, we would be more than happy to see if we can reach out to Maryland Human Services and also see if we can get do you want to see a copy of their current policy? Am I correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I will see if we
great.
can reach out and get a copy of that, how that language was written, and see what the parameters are. I think what people have to understand also is that every state is unique in the way that they do things, and what one state does doesn't necessarily mean that we can directly move them into how it would work in Connecticut, plus the fact that we're such a small state. But I would be more than happy to see if we can reach out and get a copy of that for you. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Robin?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's an excellent, excellent point. Sandy?
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone. I do agree with what Jeff mentioned just recently. Whether we follow the exact interpreter standards board that we recommend, we can't necessarily, as mentioned earlier, we can't leave it to nothing. So we do need to have something in effect So if there's a department or an individual who could help us be accountable to following those standards, I think looking at other states' policies and legalese, that's a good idea. But we need to have something, I think, black and white, so that we have a plan if standards are not followed. Another thing is just making sure that, as mentioned earlier, we have that contingency plan in place.
So I think at this point, the easiest thing to do, and this is what we talked about at the first meeting, is to look at the state statute around interpreters. And if you think that that needs to be tweaked, that's where we should start. And, you know, we've had this conversation for the last 2 meetings, and I'll be honest, to this point, we haven't really gotten any feedback from the group as to how do we change that state statute, because that's where you have to start, right? That's kind of like where it all begins. And we talked about that at the first meeting. So if people have thoughts on how we can change the state statute and make it tighter around standards, we would be more than happy. But that's where we need to begin. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Comey, and we don't want to be disrespectful to our presenters that we have here today, and we know how fast our time goes. So what I would like to do is move right into this meeting, and then if there's time at the end, guys, be more than happy to continue this conversation. But I never want to lose sight of what's on the agenda. So with that, I'll turn it right back over to Representative Comey. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Abercrombie. So we will move into item 3 on the agenda, which is our presentation by our guest here today. We have Diane Lilo Martin. She's a PhD with the UConn Board of Trustees and a professor of distinguished professor of linguistics and a department head. So we were going to go right into that. Heather perhaps is the one who will share the presentation, but welcome, Diane, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I am sharing my screen now. I hope that it's working fine for everybody. So I'm happy to tell you what we have at UConn regarding ASL academics, coursework, and also research. Very briefly, I know time is limited. So the first thing I wanted to do was just, as already been done, to introduce myself briefly and tell you a little bit more about other people who are involved with ASL education at UConn. So I have been a researcher on American Sign Language linguistics for many years, over 30, I can say that much. And I have been part of the growth of American Sign Language studies at UConn over that time period. I've been here at UConn since 1986. And we have also now grown quite a bit. So there are 3 full-time ASL lecturers who teach the courses in ASL language and also deaf culture courses. And we have a full-time person who is in a position called Assistant Professor in Residence. And that's Dr. Linda Pelletier. She is also the coordinator for the program and teaches the ASL interpreting courses that we have. Recently, a faculty committee came together of about 8 professors who are interested in supporting and expanding the program. And we have been doing efforts to expand what we are able to offer at UConn, which I will briefly mention at the end. I also wanted to tell you briefly about the research that it happens here. Again, there's a lot of research all over the university that is important for this topic, but I just briefly will tell you that my own research is primarily looking at sign language acquisition by deaf children and also by hearing children who are signers. And one of the key findings of this research is that children who are exposed to a rich linguistic input, including sign language and in many cases spoken language develop both languages. They are bilinguals, and this is an important factor for the education and lives of deaf people. Another researcher at UConn is Dr. Marie Coppola, who has found, among many other things, that early exposure to language, whether it's in sign language or spoken language, is crucial for the development of mathematical skills. And children who have delays or interruptions in their linguistic development will also show difficulties with even very basic math skills. Another researcher at UConn is Dr. Hannah Dostal in the Egg School of Education, and she has done research looking at development of literacy by deaf and hard of hearing children using a program she calls strategic and interactive writing instruction. A couple of other people who do research related to this at UConn include Dr. Laura Malden from the Department of Family Studies, and she finds that hearing parents of deaf and hard of hearing children need more explicit information about their options. Dr. Brenda Brueggemann from the Department of English has a lot of work on deaf and disabled writers and artists of note. So you can see that in a variety of programs and departments around the university, we have currently strength in the area of research and including things that are of immediate importance for the lives of deaf and hard of hearing people. Now, regarding academics, what we have here include a large number of ASL language courses. This has been very popular. We started offering ASL language courses in the 1980s, and we have continued to expand as much as we can over the years. I noted on the slide that 10 years ago, the total annual enrollment was about 350 seats, and now we're at about 600 seats, and we always get requests for more seats in our entry-level courses, which we can only provide so many of, but there's a continuing demand. So we developed, first of all, we developed two minors, minor in ASL and deaf culture, and a minor in interpreting between ASL and English. I don't have the numbers of how many students have completed these minors, but I do know that every year, I'm going to make a real rough guess here, about maybe 10 in each minor. So there definitely is a continuing interest in that. And just fall of 2020, we had the beginning of our major in ASL and deaf studies. Kind of too bad about the timing, but there has been all this interest even during the pandemic, and that currently enrolls 21 major students, including 3 honor students. So the courses that contribute to that major are a wide variety of deaf studies courses in the language courses, of course, but also culture, literature, women's studies, linguistics, etc. Anytime you have a question, by the way, I'd be happy to address it. This is a graph to show you the enrollment over the past 4 academic years. You can see for the ASL, the total enrollment in ASL and deaf studies courses at UConn, we have been hovering around that 600 mark. That's pretty much what we can do given our current size in terms of the number of faculty we have. The enrollment in interpreting courses in particular, we have 4 courses that are offered per year, and that has been increasing over the years as well. For comparison, I found out from a colleague at the University of Texas, Austin, where they have a ASL program that also offers courses in language. They have 5 full-time lecturers compared to our 3 in ASL courses. They have about the same, little bit less, maybe 500 a year. So that could be in some ways considered a peer or a comparison university. Now, I was asked to talk to you a little bit about pathways to interpreter certification. I realized that you had a long discussion about interpreter certification at your previous meeting, so some of this may be redundant to you, but just to think about it in the context of what we offer here, let me mention these requirements. So according to the National Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, candidates must have a bachelor's degree in any field, not necessarily in interpreting. And one reason it's good for them to have a bachelor's degree in another field is because it helps with the breadth of knowledge that will be used in a variety of circumstances that they may find themselves in. The RID has a knowledge exam, which candidates must pass. And over the past 4 years, their pass rate has varied between 47 to 90%. So we can see that even the knowledge exam is a tough milestone for people who are trying to become interpreters. So having had training, particularly in an interpreter education program, would of course contribute to potential interpreters' ability to pass that exam. But the knowledge exam is not the only thing, and the higher bar is really from the interview and performance exam. This is a much lower pass rate of 29 to 39% over the past 4 years. And I have been told that a gap between completing some educational program for interpreters and passing that and receiving certification of about 4 years is very common. So I'm not a certified interpreter myself. I asked Linda Pelletier, who is, about that, and she emphasized that what interpreter trainees need is a lot of experience and additional training, right, to help them to achieve the level that they need to achieve to pass that certification. In Connecticut, and again, this is probably repetition for you, interpreters can work if they have, even if they are not certified, if they have graduated from an accredited interpreter training program and passed the knowledge exam. So this means they may work for up to 5 years before they pass this performance exam. And I would imagine that part of what you're interested in is what happens during the period, that in-between period when they are working as an interpreter, but not yet fully certified, and how that goes, what kind of training they get during that time period. It's also possible for interpreters to work in Connecticut if they're not certified, but they have been screened by the Massachusetts Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I understand there's some, that this is a possibility that many interpreters come to Connecticut from Massachusetts because there are not enough in Connecticut to satisfy the needs that are here. With this in mind, let's think about possible future directions at UConn. We have thought a lot about the possibility of developing an accredited interpreter education program. We've actually thought about the possibility that this might be best done at the master's level, considering that students, first of all, could obtain their undergraduate degree, take their language courses, get their breadth education, understanding more about deaf culture, et cetera, and that they would then potentially go on for a master's program, during which time they would obtain that additional training, additional experience, additional practice that would bring them that much further towards being able to pass the performance exam. This is something we have just started to think about. It's not at all something that I can say is in the works or something that is happening. Please don't misunderstand me. This is just a thought. It's not yet something that is happening, but it's something that could happen, potentially. Other things that might be happening or are happening, we actually just found out a couple of days ago that this group of 8 faculty I mentioned, we put in a proposal for a grant from focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion to host an event at UConn, focusing on the ideas of access and education for deaf and hard of hearing people at UConn. So we were awarded that grant. We will have this event where we will be inviting members of the community to participate, and we will have, we are planning to have some featured guest invited presenters as well. There is also, that's going to be happening at some point in the spring. We also recently worked with the people at the NEAG School of Education, and an approved ASL teacher certification program is now in place, which is ready to be promoted and ready for participants to join it. We have been working together again to request addition of tenure track research faculty members, but this is not something that's happening at the moment. It's something that would be considered, but it's not. Our budget at UConn is, it hasn't yet allowed for this to happen. But if we were to get this, then we would hope to expand current ASL studies offerings and offer a number of additional things. For example, the more courses for the teacher certification program, for example. And the group is working towards enhancing collaboration between the researchers in these various areas. So these are things that we hope or plan or might or potentially could do in the future. And I would be happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. This is fantastic, Diane. All right. Can you stop sharing your screen so I can see everybody? Okay. Hello. All right. Well, I would love to hear some thoughts from our group here. Was our chairs have any questions? Our co-chairs have any questions before we get into?
I'll wait until everyone else asks their questions. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you. Okay, so my apologies. I did not see who raised their hands first, so I'm just going to start from the far left. Jeff, you have something to comment?
Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. And thank you to the University of Connecticut for their continuous collaboration. They're very, very important for us and for the community. Also, I was wondering if that PowerPoint can be shared with us, because we would like to promote that into the community and share with other interested parties. I mean, obviously, you know, interpreters who take the classes at UConn and also need to improve their skills, part of that crucial aspect is the practical aspect. So, you know, there are positions where people can volunteer, and we need to prepare our interpreters for the future. That is absolutely clear. And the more practice, as was mentioned, the more will benefit the interpreters or future interpreters with their skills and enhance their skills. Also, there is a lot of research happening, and hopefully there will be more positions. So anything that we can help with and anything we can collaborate with UConn would be very, very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, Jeff. So currently our undergraduate students who are taking the interpreting courses or other courses occasionally do volunteer at ASD, for example, or in other places to help them with their training and practice and to get more experience. So there are some opportunities for those students currently, but of course, as I've already mentioned, what we have currently is only 4 courses. We don't have a full program, so we don't have yet a fully developed system for placement of students in internships or anything like that. We do work together with other agencies occasionally, and also with the University of Connecticut Interpreting Services, to give students opportunities to learn more about interpreting, to do shadowing work, for example. So we do have small programs, not a fully developed program, but we do have some opportunities for the students to practice. We would definitely need to have a more expanded system for these kinds of internships if we were to expand what we are offering in terms of interpreter education. So that's a big thing. And it could, I mean, of course, if that kind of thing happened, we would definitely want to work with the broader community in Connecticut to see what the appropriate placements would be and how to do the appropriate mentoring by established interpreters. The second question that you asked about the community support, well, we just found out, as I said, about this grant. So we are working to set up this event in the spring, and we're going to be inviting the community members to participate in that. And I think that will be a good opportunity for people to show their support and to help to provide feedback also on the directions that we might want to go in. So we would love to see you there. We don't have any specifics quite ready to share yet, but I can assure you, Jeff, I'll share them with you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Representative Abercrombie?
Thank you. Diane, I think what might be helpful, well, first of all, thank you for that presentation. I think it was really helpful for all of us to understand where our limitations are, I'm going to say, as a state when it comes to interpreters. And that's what we're trying to get to. That's what this whole part of this working group is the educational piece and also workforce development, right? And you can't get workforce development without the educational piece. So thank you for being here. I will say that we have tried to, poor Heather has been reaching out to CCSU, and it's been very challenging trying to get some information from them about another program that we have in the state. So as soon as we do get that information, we will share that with this group. But what I would like to offer, Diane, and Joanne Lombardo has my contact information. As you get this group up and running, please send it to my office so that we can send it out to our membership so that if people are interested, they have a contact. We also have an advisory council that is through the Aging and Disabilities Committee that I'm sure would be more than happy to participate as this goes forward. And I know Andrew from the Aging and Disability Agency is up next, and he's probably going to offer the same thing. But I think that the more we get people included with your working group, the more diverse it will be, and the more we have a lot of knowledge around this working group. And I know they would love to share their expertise with you. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Absolutely. We are all interested in braiding our knowledge and working together. Andrew, it's like.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Thank you very much. I would certainly echo Chairwoman Abercrombie's, Representative Abercrombie's remarks that the advice, I can't speak for the board. I'm just a guy who goes to the board meetings, but I think they would all say that they would enjoy the knowledge and experience of the people at UConn as they get, richer in their knowledge of this topic, and would love to have people from the professors group coming to or joining in even in a casual way with the advisory board. But I don't speak for the board, so I'm just saying I think that might be true. And I had two questions. I don't know if they're quick or not, and I'll say them both. Of the students who take up ASL studies at UConn, is there any way of even saying ballpark whether how many of them are taking it up because they have an interest in learning ASL or because they're doing it on a professional path of becoming a counselor for people who are deaf or an interpreter, of course. So that was one question. Is it sometimes just an academic interest, or is it building to a professional career? And then the second was, I know historically there have been training programs or programs in ASL at, I think, one of our community colleges. And now you're supposed to have a 4-year degree. And historically, were there people at Northwestern getting ASL training who are now deciding, well, let me now go to UConn or somewhere to get the 4-year degree, which is required, which the community college, of course, doesn't offer? So let me know if my two questions weren't clearly stated, but those are my two questions.
Thank you for your comments, and they were very clear. So as to the first regarding the goals of the students who are enrolling in our courses, I can't give you numbers, but I can definitely say there's a split. Some of them are there just out of curiosity. Sometimes they think it's going to be an easy A, which it isn't. But a good many of them are there for professional concerns. For example, the Department of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences often has students who are coming to take our courses, and even our minor. In SLHS, students, well, in the whole university, students have to do a set of courses that is not in their major, called a related area, and each department has to approve the kinds of things that would count as a related area. And SLHS has specifically mentioned our minors as a related area for their students. So many of the students who come to us are future speech language therapists, audiologists, et cetera. And we also often have students who are interested in pursuing a joint individualized major. Before we had our major, we had the possibility for students to do an individualized major, and they would frequently combine courses in ASL with courses in their other areas of interest. Nursing, for example, we had a number of students who did that. There was even a student who did an honors project on puppetry with ASL, and a number of different kinds of interests and professions in which they want to use the ASL studies. Now, as with any language, we have many more students in the first year sequence than in the subsequent years, right? So you have to do more than a year in order to have this kind of success. So we can say that a lot of students take it for 1 year, sometimes to satisfy a language requirement or to out of interest. But those who continue on in the level 2, not in the second year, which is level 3 and 4, or the third year, level 5 and 6, and the other advanced courses that we have, those students are very often using it along with their professional training in a wide variety of areas. As for your second question, you asked about the students at Northwestern Community College. I have heard of such students occasionally transferring to UConn. You mentioned CCSU, or I think it was Representative Abercrombie mentioned CCSU. I think more of them transfer to CCSU. I think they might have it's closer geographically, but also I think it may be something that more of them do. But it is my understanding that there are actually at the moment very, very few students in the program at Northwestern. I've heard, I don't know this firsthand, but I have heard that the numbers of students who have been attending that program have been decreasing quite substantially over the years. And so I think that it's less of an issue regarding them continuing someplace for their higher education now. As far as, in comparison, let's say, the students who come here very often, this may be the first time they've encountered ASL, so they have to start with the very first level. But we do also have students coming in who have taken ASL at high school or who have taken ASL at other colleges and universities, in which case we, of course, have to give them a placement exam in order to get them in the right level that matches our program.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a little bit of what I was thinking as well about what sort of majors complement ASL. Jim, you're next.
Oh, I apologize for not taking my hand down. Representative Abercrombie answered my question or had the same question. If Diane could send us the information about the program in the springtime, I'd love to see it and be able to get it out to the hospital community so they can attend. I think it sounds like a great and terrific program. And Diane, if you need my email, I know Joanne Lombardi knows how to track me down. So thank you.
Thank you for your input. I'll be happy to do that. I'll be happy to share that information.
Thank you, Jim. Susan, good to see you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, I'm sure you know already that in the state of Connecticut, students can take ASL in high school as a foreign language requirement. And UConn has that wonderful college credit program that they can take while they're in high school. Have you thought of combining that with ASL? Because I know many high schools do not offer ASL. They don't have the capacity. And they would, and I know a lot of students are very interested in taking it. So I didn't know if you thought of combining the two.
Thank you for that suggestion. It actually hadn't crossed my mind before to look into that, so I really welcome the suggestion. I'm aware of the fact that there are high school students taking ASL courses, and I know that one of the issues has been the adequate training of the instructors for those courses. That's partly why we teamed up with NEAG for the program that we have there now. And I would actually be interested in looking into this possibility. I know the ECE, Early College Experience, is the program you're talking about, and we can certainly connect up with the people in that division at UConn and see whether there's any potential for growing it there. Certainly the earlier students begin to learn ASL from highly qualified instructors, the better off they're going to be and the more well prepared they will be. If they decide to become interpreters, they will have a head start on that. So I think it's a good idea to promote that. Thank you.
It's interesting that Susan brought that up because I'm aware of New Haven Public Schools, and they offer all sorts of languages as supplement after school programs, online programs, and you could learn all kinds of really, languages that you would not have typical access to within the school day or within the curriculum that exists. And I know that some of these programs are being offered in New Haven anyways by Yale. So I reached out to them a few weeks ago to see if they would consider ASL as one of those languages as well. So we'll see where we can think about those. Getting kids interested earlier is better, most certainly. Marissa.
Hello. Can you guys hear me through the mask?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you, chairpersons, for allowing me to speak. My name is Marissa Rivera. I'm an advocate from Disability Rights Connecticut. I am bilingual, both American Sign Language and English, and as well as a graduate of an interpreting program myself. So this is kind of great to be talking about investing in educating and growing interpreters in Connecticut. I would like to bring a point of the lack of, or there are disparities within the interpreting profession, such as I think we have very few certified interpreters of color in the interpreting community. I'm sure someone else has better numbers than I do, but I think there are only about 3, maybe 2 certified interpreters of color in the whole state of Connecticut. And I think that that number needs to grow. And there are a lot of barriers to getting that. And a lot of that is because to become an interpreter, it requires a lot of your own personal money to support yourself. And it's great that once you can graduate, you can do a lot of volunteer work. But what the lack of support is financial assistance. Because if it takes you 5 years to become a certified worker and you need a certification to do a lot of these jobs, that means you need some income in the meantime to hold yourself. And I know personally of recently from the Northwest interpreting program, which I believe, if I'm right, you have to graduate from an interpreting program to become an interpreter, or to at least register to become an interpreter. As of 2021, there were only 4 graduates. And as of my knowledge, 3 of them are pursuing other full-time jobs. They're not pursuing sign language interpreting because 1, you have to have such a level of qualifications, and 2, they don't have that income and support to do a lot of volunteer work. So therefore, we're losing a lot of interpreters. And if it takes 5 years for 4 interpreters to become certified, that means we are going to get maybe 4 interpreters in 5 years to grow our pool. I just want to emphasize that the pool needs to be expanded, and that investment of growing the interpreters to become full-fledged certified interpreters needs to be maybe an investment, as well as maybe thinking about recruiting out of state is probably the fastest way to recruit and growing our interpreter pool. The only thing is hard is you have people who are very local, here in the deaf community who use specific signs. So that's why it's kind of a dilemma. How do we invest and grow a greater number of interpreters better and faster while also meeting the needs of people who are deaf? And I'm speaking from people who are trying to get medical care services who are deaf, who can't get an interpreter in the 2-hour time mark, who need emergency services. So it's just such a high need, especially in the medical field, of needing qualified, certified interpreters that, I think that there definitely needs to be a support for the gap years of 5 years to become a certified interpreter typically. And some people still don't make it within 5 years. So that is my spiel. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And I just agree that support and programs, I understand that there are some jobs that people can do while they're not certified. They can still do certain kinds of work, but there are issues and constraints. So I absolutely agree that more ways to support people, and especially to support underrepresented people, would be very important.
Diane, just real quickly, what are some of those jobs that you just mentioned?
Well, as I mentioned in the slide, I understand that students can work that if they have passed the knowledge exam, they can work as interpreters in the state. And I think actually probably some of the people here are better informed than I am about the details of that, but there are certain jobs, and I believe in educational interpreting as well. So there are some things that they will do. They can work with mentorship, they can work with guidance, right? But I don't know how substantial those programs are, or how close they are to meeting the need.
Do they get that? So you talk about getting that, taking that kind of that preliminary exam to see where they're at. Is that something they do in Connecticut? Is there a program here in Connecticut by which they get that exam, or is that something that state, farms out with another company and oversees that?
That exam is run by the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, and I believe it's online at the moment, so people can take it from Connecticut. But the organization that administers it is a national organization.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marissa. That was a really important topic to bring up, and we appreciate your input on that. And we do have to start thinking out of the box to really grow the pool, especially in the medical field, in those other areas that are in great need of interpreters. Sandy, I believe you were next.
Yes, thank you so much. This is a really good discussion. You know, I used to be a teacher at South Connecticut State University. I taught sign language there. There were 4 of us that were deaf instructors there. And you are right. There are more and more. We need to grow this program. We had more and more come into the program. I would teach ASL 1, 2, and 3, and then they would get credit for those 3 language courses. After that, students who showed commitment, enthusiasm, and abilities, we were a little bit stuck with where they would go for further education. There was really no other place at that time to really recommend furthering that education or different jobs, maybe working in group homes or working as a job coach within the deaf or hard of hearing deafblind community. But it was really hard at that time because there wasn't enough support for just living needs. So yes, I do believe that we need to work with collaboration. Also, as mentioned earlier, the Yale, they do have an ASL program there, which is very similar to our program. So working together to pool all of those individuals and develop more of that interest to further their skills.
Yes, thank you. I'm all in favor of that.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you. So Sandy, if I may, excuse me, Madam Chair. So Sandy, you're saying that you can go, and also for Diane as well. So you can go to college. I know that you're saying there's you have a minor program at UConn for interpreting. But Sandy, you could go and pass, actually when you were an instructor, you could pass 1, 2, 3 ASL, and then from there you would have to move into an interpreter training program. Is that correct?
No. So at the university I teach at, they offer ASL as a world language. So in a similar department with other world languages, they would just pass that language credit using ASL as their language of choice. Now, 3 classes does not instantly mean that they are ready to move on to an interpreting program. They've only received 3 semesters of sign language learning. So after taking our classes at the university, then that's really it. There's nothing further here that they can take. We are limited to just ASL 1 through 3. There's no other advanced opportunities. They would have to switch over into another university or department to get more advanced training or further training in ASL, whether that be, moving into a speech language program, a speech language pathologist or audiologist program. A lot of students will move into those types of programs. So they'll choose a career path that may align with ASL, but then they may not.
Understood. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, next, I believe Jim, your hand up.
Thank you. I want to pick up where I think Marissa started this conversation and take advantage of Diane's expertise as we look at solutions to the issue of needing to improve the pipeline or increase individuals into the pipeline to become interpreters. I've taken some notes here. I think Marissa brought up the need for support for individuals during the transition from school to when they get themselves up and running. A common theme we're hearing about workforce shortages has to do with faculty and having the teaching faculty and able to I think all across the medical field. And now I'm going to add the interpreters to this. But Diane, what are some other things that we could do to increase the number of individuals in the pipeline? Are there barriers that you think we could address, or just anything any suggestions that you would have on how we could increase the number of interpreters in the state?
Well, that's a big question. And I don't know what the solution is, of course, right? I do see a lot of the need in the places that you just mentioned, right? So additional faculty to teach these students, right? And additional support during the higher levels of training that they would need to have, right? So at the moment, I actually, well, from our perspective, we have so many students who are interested in ASL at UConn now, and people who come here with, whether they have some background knowledge or not, they've come in and they become very excited about doing the program. So at this point, from our perspective, I think what we would need more is the program to meet what these students are interested in doing. I think we have students who are interested in such a program, but in a wider perspective, to encourage more students to go into such programs, I'm sure that greater accessibility in multiple ways would be needed. So as Marissa mentioned, in order to increase representation from underrepresented groups, specific actions in that direction are probably helpful, such as bringing ASL to high schools in a greater variety of places, as you suggested, with qualified instructors. I think it's really important to mention that it's hard to find qualified instructors, right? So just as qualified interpreters are in short supply, qualified instructors are in short supply. So they need to be trained as well. And part of all of that, I believe, is going to be enhancing educational opportunities for the deaf and hard of hearing people in Connecticut who themselves can become those teachers and interpreters, and increasing the ability for those students to get a higher education by increasing the foundations and support for their education in the previous years. So I'm sure Jeff can say a lot about the potential for students at ASD and other parts of the state. And I would really like to see growing supports for the deaf students themselves to have this higher education and to have this training so that they can become interpreters or teachers. They are really needed, and special efforts are really important for bringing them in. So that would be the one of the key missing pieces at the moment, I think, is bringing in support for the deaf people who are going to be the highest qualified teachers there could be.
I see Harvey has his hand raised.
Robin?
Hello,
Interrupt
yes.
for a
Good
moment.
morning.
Yes.
Diane,
Harvey?
Hi, Kathy.
Harvey, just one moment. Robin, do you see Jeff Raven's?
I do.
hand up?
I'm
It's been up-
sorry. Yes. Okay.
It's been up for a while. I just want to make sure you were seeing it on your screen.
I
That's
do.
all.
I see Jeff and Marissa.
Okay.
it's
and
okay.
Harvey.
I'll let Harvey speak first and then I can go. No problem. I have time.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Good morning, Diane. It's nice to see you again. And thank you so much for providing the information that you did this morning in your informative presentation. You know, I think a lot of us have raised some good points for consideration this morning. I think one idea that was raised is also, you know, something that we can bring into a legislative proposal in terms of developing funding and support for any students that want to go into the field of interpreting, because it does seem to be a large need for many of them. So perhaps we could develop some sort of funding support to enhance that program for interpreter training, as well as maybe stipends or potential grants for those students and individuals who are going to school to study to become an interpreter. I think that's going to meet a critical need of the state.
Thank you, Harvey. And I think there's some crossover with what's going on at DECD and their workforce development efforts. Jeff.
So I wanted to make a few comments from what everyone else has said in terms of the development of future interpreters. When the state passed ASL as one of the world language options, and that happened several years ago, I saw 2 to 3 high schools immediately jump on that bandwagon and offer that. Now we have about 10 to 12 high schools that are doing that. I think that's a nice progression. Obviously, this is going to take time. As mentioned earlier, there is a lack of qualified ASL instructors within the state to teach those types of courses. Now, point in fact is that we are currently doing 1 class online for our district. We teach 2 ASL classes online. Previously, we've been able to do that more today than in the past. Hopefully this will continue. Online ASL instruction is not comparable to in-person live instruction. However, what I've found interesting is that in talking with a group of individuals this past weekend related to the few teachers that teach ASL in middle school, not here in Connecticut, this actually occurs in New York. They found that those teachers that teach high school ASL as well as middle school ASL, they found it easier to teach middle school just because, our brains are more sponge-like in middle school. We're able to learn those languages more efficiently. And it also creates less pressure for the instructors, for the students at that time. And so we've noticed that students are now taking Spanish or French or other languages beginning in middle school. We haven't really invested ASL courses in middle school yet. That is something we might want to look at, is just exposing students at a younger age, because the more that they can pick up at a younger age, and then the longer that they have in using that language and practicing that language, the better prepared they are for the future. If they have 4 to 5 years of training and practice before they even hit a college program, then that's just more efficient. And so it was interesting, that conversation with those groups of individuals. Another comment that I wanted to make is related to the workforce. Yes, the interpreting workforce is going to be very important for this state. However, I have to, as an administrator of school services, there is a huge gap in related to residential live staff, educational staff, and we are trying to reach out to many, like CCSU. They offer what's called a certain field plus ASL. So those that take the field of home care and then minor in ASL, then they have job opportunities here. And so that is something that I feel, if they take ASL at UConn, along with other majors that are marketable to the deaf community, then I think that's going to have a huge impact. Right now, COVID-19 is a huge barrier in how we're facing these certain obstacles, but this is a potential. Something I just wanted to throw out there on the table. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff, for those suggestions. And I would be very interested to reach out to other areas that you mentioned as potential marketable connections for students to make. As I mentioned, sometimes in the past, students have done that more on their own, but we can make more of an effort to establish those connections and encourage students to do those things, similar to what we have already in place with SLHS. So thank you for mentioning that.
Marissa, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So yes, I have to wholeheartedly agree with Diane and what Jeff have been saying about the workforce and needing to develop the workforce. If I could just pause and rewind just a back of going, okay, why do we need interpreters in the first place? We need sign language interpreters because services are not accessible. We don't have bilingual staff people who work at hospitals, or at least not enough, to serve the deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind population. That's why we use interpreters as kind of a shortcut, a gap in terms of most people's abilities to learn sign language. So that's why we have to devote years and years to develop people to learn sign language so that so that other people don't have to do it, basically. And what I would suggest is, yes, keep growing the number of interpreters. And I also add, yes, as well as deaf interpreters. I don't think we've had a deaf interpreter graduate from our interpreting program. I don't know how long. I may be wrong on that, but I don't know of any deaf interpreter that's graduated from the state of Connecticut who's deaf themselves. So, and we already know that there's a lack of numbers of deaf interpreters. So maybe that could be also an outreach moment. But what I am going back to is, yes, keep developing the interpreters because they are sort of that gap in quality and services that maybe other places can't meet the need directly. But if we can develop people who already have the language, which are mostly people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or deaf blind, then it would almost be easier to train them to learn and do services rather than spending 5 years for interpreters. Not saying and demeaning interpreters, but I'm saying that maybe it needs to be a balanced effort that all services, like I know that we've hired Alvin Chaggy. You know, that's a great addition rather than hiring someone, hiring an interpreter who can interpret all the time. Having Alvin, he only needed minimal training, I'm sure, to do his job. He was already fluent. It's hard to build fluency, extremely hard than it is to train someone on how to do their job. Second, I would add is that maybe we can look at other programs across the US for interpreter trainings and different programs, such as there is, I believe, a medical training program in Massachusetts. The thing is with a lot of interpreting programs, it's all about building language fluency and it's not yet about specializations. You're supposed to learn specializations when you're out in the field. Now, you can kind of only get a little bit of specializations when you're not yet a certified interpreter. So what I would suggest is maybe looking into some of these programs. I believe Colorado has a legal profession, specialized in legal professions. So I think that some ideas is maybe if we want to get people into the pipeline is maybe promoting some of these specialized programs or ideas and getting them into Connecticut, because I know we do have a high need for these. Additionally, I don't know if someone's already written this down, but an apprenticeship. I know that some people have to commit a certain number of hours, and maybe something like this in Connecticut as an apprenticeship would be, maybe it's what we need. I'm not sure how easy that is to put up, but I do see that other professions do have that, as well as that. I think I'll stop there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marissa, for your input. Diane, do you have any additions to?
I think they're all good points, and certainly would support the idea that in many contexts, having the service providers themselves be people who are bilingual or deaf people who are signers obviously that makes a lot of sense. And I love it when we can use direct communication as opposed to working through an interpreter. I use that as much as possible. So yeah, I support that.
Thank you. Representative Abercrombie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for this frank discussion. I think I've learned a few things here. I think I would think that most of us have. Marissa, never stop talking. You're such a wealth of information. It's really great to hear your thoughts and your expertise in this area, because that's what's needed. And that's why we have this working group to figure out where we go from here. Just to highlight a few things, and please add to this anything that I missed. I think that we need to have a conversation with SDE, State Department of Education, about the classes that are offered at the high school level. I actually like the idea about looking at the middle school and seeing how, if we can incorporate this as a program there, either under world language or perhaps as a after school program to see how many kids are interested in it. I think you're right about the middle school kids. It's sort of like our elementary kids. I think they're still sponges, right? And so our middle school kids are hungry for knowledge. So I think that's a great suggestion to look at the middle school level. I also like the idea that Jeff had about at the university level, people that get degrees getting a minor with the ASL. I think that's a great thought. And I think that's something that we can talk to higher ed about, right? And that's why this work group is so important, because these are all things that if we weren't sitting around the table together, we wouldn't be talking about. I like the idea of the connection between UConn and SDE about maybe interpreting, about combining into their program. I think that's great. I think that gives, I think that kids that go into that higher educational level in high school, I think this helps them in the long run. And I think it's something we always talk about. How do we give students a taste of fields that are out there, right? And I think this is one way of doing it, giving them the opportunity to take a look at that. So those are just some of my thoughts at this point from this discussion. If there are other areas that I might not have thought about, please, open up this dialogue so I can write it down, because, just because this working group will be ending in December, doesn't mean that these conversations end, right? Some of these things are going to take time. And we also have to realize that next session is our short session, and we are limited in the bills that can be introduced because there's rules around what can be introduced in a short session. And I think we're going to have Heather send out how the statute is written for a short session and what we're allowed to introduce for bills and what we're not allowed to introduce for bills. So I think that might also be helpful. So thank you, Diane and UConn, really, because this was an eye opener. So I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy day to be here and work with us on this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. And the other sort of takeaway that I think we can spend some more time sussing out is the opportunities for apprenticeships and where we could align some of the programs and the needs going forward. So just also highlighting that and any potential for the funding support for interpreters of color or in high needs communities. Jeff?
Yeah, just one quick thing. Typically, I would throw it into the chat room, but we don't have chat available. One thing that I think is going to be very important for the training of interpreters that we need to keep in mind is adding a course load or a course related to interpreting for the deaf-blind community specifically, because that is in itself its own set of skills. I didn't realize the needs and how many deaf-blind constituents we have in this state. And so that is something I want to throw on the table so that we don't overlook that community, specifically in the interpreting specialization.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. Thanks, Diane, for joining us today. And I hope that we'll see you again and get to work with you as we move forward, and really look forward to seeing your program grow and thrive, and integrating the groups that we have at the state level with your advisory group that you have as well. So thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciated the chance to share this information with you. Really appreciate your support in all of these things, and I'd be happy to meet with a future group or in other ways that might be useful. So I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Diane, be careful what you wish for. We might have you come to the advisory council at some point. Which I think might be helpful. A lot of the members that are on this working group are also part of our advisory council. So, but not everybody is here. So I think that they may, and it's up to them. I'm just someone that participates. I'm not an active member. But I think that it might be helpful at some point for you to come and really kind of give this presentation again, so that everyone understands where the challenges are for us as a state at this point, but also the opportunities, right? Just the opportunities we thought about just in this one quick meeting. You put everyone in the same room, and I think that we can expand on that. So I would invite you to stay on if you'd like for the rest of this meeting. We're here until 11:30, but we do understand that you might have other things to do. So whatever works for you, I think will be fine with us. Robin, I'd like you to share at this point some positive about some of the work that Alvin's been doing, and how, this group has really highlighted to the public the needs, but also some of the help that we have here at the state level.
Thank you, Representative. Yes, I just want to commend and hold up Alvin for being such an important support on a number of issues for a specific constituent in my district. I mentioned last time that he had been extremely helpful and present. Ongoing presence was really important, keeping my constituent connected with the Department of Labor, and really digging deep into some of the struggles that as his employment issues and the unemployment, the issues that Department of Labor wasn't really aware of, and the patience that it took Alvin and the Department of Labor as well, and the constituent, to work out through email and through that was really, the best way to communicate that they have understood the whole dynamics of mask wearing and the ability to work in certain industries. Actually, it was a teacher, right? So I just wanted to thank Alvin. And then there was a second thing that he did with the same constituent, which was also excellent. And it had to do with the Yale New Haven Hospital, and he's working with the hospital, my constituent being a really strong advocate, into making sure that when he goes to doctor's appointments, that that the providers have a clear mask for him to do his lip reading, and had missed a couple of appointments. There was all kinds of things that were happening because even though the providers had the information that he was deaf, that they were still calling his name with a mask on, and he was unable to meet his appointment. So as Marissa, said, that in the healthcare, having some policies change, Alvin was a really important part of that, along with being a sort of a teammate with my constituent. And hopefully going forward, Yale New Haven Hospital in all of its facilities has a policy or a practice in place that will make it easier for this community and to communicate with the providers. So thank you for all you did, Alvin, for him. And this is the highlight, and this is the importance of this position within the state. So if we can keep sending Alvin all of the referrals that need some work, I think that he's doing an excellent job. And I just wanted to give him a shout out and applause for helping and doing exactly what he was meant to be doing there in that position.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So Robin, before we move on, still on this topic, are there any other thoughts on the higher education piece or the workforce development piece that, as you listen to this presentation, that you think we should jot down as we go into the future and think about this? Jeff?
Susan. Oh.
Yes, so just one more thing, in terms of the higher ed discussion and workforce development related to vocational rehabilitation support for students who graduate from here at American School for the Deaf, or really any public high school, any deaf, hard of hearing student. In the past, and ever since, state VR has been really good at supporting our students going to college at potentially Gallaudet or National Technology Institute for the Deaf, and pursuing higher education. However, nowadays, apparently they are considering changing this. And I've had this discussion with VR, so they are not going to be surprised for my fight, so to speak, in regarding this. But in terms of their considerations, they are wanting students to go into the community college field first before they move on to a higher education university or four-year college. And I do understand that. They don't want to invest funding going to a four-year college before or having a student fail at that time or drop out. However, I want to make sure that we discuss, if the conversation is going to a four-year college, it needs to be at a fully accessible communication, open, direct communication university, such as Gallaudet University or NTID. Going to another college using interpreters, that is a different world. That is an entirely different beast. They're not able to communicate with their peers. They have to use a third person, an interpreter. And I do understand that. They want to prove that the students are going to do well before they send them off to a four-year university or college. However, we need to really understand the complexities behind all of this. They're sending them into a area or field where they're not able to get that full direct communication access and expecting them to do well in that situation. So now, talking about students going into college, I'm not gonna talk about certain things in terms of my experience, but when students go from a residential or fully communication accessed environment such as ASD, going into a college using an interpreter, that is a huge 180. So you're trying to think about, they're going into an environment without clear communication access. So I want to make sure that we're throwing this on the table and that we really analyze and discuss this for the future of VR support for our students.
Robin, if I may for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
So Jeff, this isn't an area, and I'll only speak for myself, that I'm very versed on. So I would love to at some point have a conversation with you offline just to educate myself on it more and then figure out where do we go from here. This is the first I've heard about this, so I need to do some work on my end to really educate myself on this. But thank you for raising that issue. It isn't something I've heard of before. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. And while I was working, while Susan and I have been working on the transition out of the high school, either into the workforce or into colleges, this sort of fits in with that same situation. Susan?
Sorry, my video. Thank you, Jeff and Representative Comey. That's exactly what I wanted to speak just for a moment on. When Representative Comey and I met with the Bureau of Rehabilitative Services, about workforce development, I had wanted to speak to them about how they reach the deaf and hard of hearing students when they're on a 504, about transitioning into their next step after high school. And they said they don't have access to any of that data. They don't know who is deaf and hard of hearing. There's no communication from the schools reaching out. And so Representative Comey reached out to the Department of Special Education for the state, and they're working on collecting 504 data, but that won't be out until July of 2022. And it's not going to be broken into disability categories. And if it's not broken into disability categories, then you can't have solutions that are driven by data. So I would love to discuss that in the future. And I would love discussing piggybacking onto the transition legislation, that if you have a 504 plan during your, I'd say, junior year 504 meeting, you should be discussing transition and what your next steps are, and discussing things like when you go and visit schools, you need to talk to the Disability Services Office and find out what services they provide. You need to invite the student to this transition meeting and make sure they're actually present. I had a parent yesterday approach me and tell me that they had their child invited, that they had their child invited to their 504 meeting. And when they showed up to the meeting, the child wasn't there. And the school said, well, they're in gym, so we'll just fill them in later. So there has to be something that's either legislated, because using the best practices that they go by isn't working. We need to figure out some sort of solution. So if anybody can help with that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Jeff, did you have a response to that?
Yes, Susan. Thank you so much for bringing up that issue related to the 504 plan. I'm so grateful you mentioned that. You know, another thing is that all of this is tracked by students' age, disability, and so forth. 504s are not. So the IEPs and the 504s are quite different in that respect. So I understand your frustration in regards to how to use the data that is presented to us. Now, legislation can make a difference because the State Department of Ed has certain requirements and mandates that you must do a transition plan for all students starting at the age of 14. And within that transition plan, you should clearly identify what that disability is and identify what resources are needed in order to meet the student's individual needs. Now, we're not there just yet, but that is something I'm working on with the State Department of Education to ensure that all resources, no matter what type of disability, if they're deafblind, have they already been connected with services for the blind? Have they been connected with the different agencies and resources? If they are deaf, what resources should they be connected with? If a student with dyslexia is documented, then what is the plan? What are the resources when they transition into college or higher education? And 504 planning is such a different ball game. And so we are trying to play a role in that as much as we can.
Well, great. We'll have to bring you into the conversation then, Jeff, because you seem to have a voice with the SDE in this manner. So thank you. Sandy?
On a different topic, and relating to what Representative Abercrombie mentioned before about NCCC and the interpreting program and the ability to have practical information and students going through this related to RID, Register of Interpreters for the Deaf. It's very important to realize that we want people to understand and develop the types of access to different colleges, including NCCC here in Connecticut. So all 13 community colleges here in Connecticut can bring people from outside of the state, and we have to involve and have this conversation with state universities as well as with community colleges at the same time, bring everybody to the table and discuss this concept of enriching the pool and prospective students who are interested in this domain. So this is a discussion that I feel, is very, very valuable. And at this level, inviting universities and community colleges relating to ASL and interpreting programs, I think are very valuable steps.
Thank you for that insight, Sandy. Any other new business that we would like to bring forward? Okay. So our next meeting is going to be on November 9th. And that will be in the same fashion. It will be regarding mental health. And Representative Abercrombie, would you like to speak to that meeting?
Sure, Madam Chair. So in the last legislative session, we had a proposal from the working group about the lack of services around the state and also in different areas, high need areas where there were lack of services. Because I thought it was a little bit more, as the chair of human services, I thought it was a little bit more complicated than what we could address in that session. We wanted to add it to this work group. I think that was mainly how we started this work group, was to address that particular issue. The agencies, the human services agencies, which is Department of Social Services, Department of Mental Health and Addiction, Department of Developmental Services, Department of Children and Families, DSS, DCF, DMS. I think I got them all. Sorry, I had to stop. Did I miss you?
DCF?
Yep, DCF, Department of Children and Families, yep. All agreed that they would be willing to come to this meeting and discuss the services that they offer, where they offer them within the state, because, and I didn't realize it, and maybe some of you did, each agency does it differently, right? So it's not a fluid system from agency to agency. Each one decides how they're going to do it. And I think that's a problem. And I think that's something in the human services fields that we have tried to address for many, many years. I will say the positive of it is that now Commissioner Gifford is now kind of taking the lead on connecting all of the human services agencies together, so that it's kind of, we're looking at like a one-stop shopping, right? So if somebody goes into the DSS system, they're also connected to the other agencies if they need be, or if they're transitioning, which is a huge issue in this state, from say DCF, which is Department of Children and Families, to DDS, Department of Developmental Services, that it's an easy transition. So for our next meeting, they will be coming to present what they currently do, where the lack of services are, what the needs are, sort of like what we did in the higher ed. And then from there, we can figure out how do we streamline this, and then also where we need to make better connections throughout the state to provide these services. So I think it's going to be a really interesting meeting. Each agency has 5 to 10 minutes to present, because I'll be honest with you, we just want to hear the bare bones of what they're doing. I think we would rather kind of try and figure out where do we go from here. So even doing that will take up at least an hour of the first part of the meeting. If anybody has any thoughts of areas that you want them to present that are not part of the original legislation, please send Heather a note, and we would be more than happy to see if it's something that the agency can accommodate. I think they're pretty versed because they did testify at the meeting last session, but just in case there's something we missed, please feel free to send Heather any thoughts that you have that we can send out to the agencies. Jeff has his hand up, and so we'll go to Jeff, but if anybody has any other thoughts about that, please feel free to comment. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, I do want to thank you for addressing mental health. This is kind of one of my babies here at ASD. I feel it is critical and needs our attention. The problem is that on November 9th, I am actually out of town doing an accreditation visit at a different school in another state. So I hate to miss this meeting. However, it's hard to change all of this and rearrange schedules, so I understand. Am I allowed to invite maybe 1 or 2 other individuals who are experts in the field of mental health, especially for youth? If I could, I would like to have them stay with the same group, but I think this session is important to bring in some other individuals. Is that allowable?
Are you asking, Jeff, if I may, are you asking if somebody from your organization can take your place at this table for the November 9th meeting?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I wish we could change the meeting, but as you know, it gets really complicated when you start to, as somebody I'm sure does lots of meetings, it gets complicated when you
I'm
start
aware.
to change
Oh,
those
yeah.
meetings. Yeah, and
aware.
it's really hard to coordinate everybody's schedule. So I'm sorry, because we would really like to have you here. But yes, please feel free, send Heather a note who you'd like to add to that meeting, and if they have an expertise, that's even better. So thank you for that. Because that's what we want, right? We want somebody to be at the table that can challenge the agencies on what they're presenting, right? And who knows it better than people that work for you around this issue. So no, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think that would be great.
All right.
Any other thoughts on the mental health piece?
Wonderful, thank you. And then our meeting after that is on December 14th. So make sure you have that in your calendar. And that will be really when we cut to the chase, as they say, and discuss what sort of legislative proposals are appropriate for the next session or for potential following sessions, depending on, you know, our rules of the road, as we say, with our on and off years. So I think it was a fantastic discussion today. We had so much energy around this issue, and there is, I believe, a lot of opportunity as well. Would our co-chairs or representatives like to say any last words?
Representative Fusco, I'll let you go first. You're on mute, sir.
Let me unmute you. Yeah, great. That's I agree with Representative Comey. This was a good meeting. It was a lot of information. It was a great presentation as to. It seems like the more that I learn, the more I feel there is to do. So there is no shortage of challenges here before this working group. But I think it's moving in the right direction. So thank you for all your time and your help.
So I would like to just comment about standards a little bit. I know that we said if we had time, and since we have a few minutes here, maybe talk about that. I think we need to move away from talking standard board and just really talking about standards that we believe interpreters should have to be here in the state of Connecticut. I'm going to go back to the state statute again, because you know, our state statute is very, very extensive. And, you know, I think that if you think that there's wording in the statute around the standards that we use as a state, I think that we are more than open to looking at that. And I think that needs to be the base that we look at when we talk about standards here in Connecticut. We all know that we still have a lot of work to do, but I think that as we start to chop away at different areas of concern, right, I think that's how we're going to get to the place that everybody wants to be at. So I'm going to say it again, please take a look at that statute, bring it, you know, break it down, and let us know where you think that we could adjust that and make it, you know, a more robust statute that really encompasses what all of you see are the needs of individuals. The other thing to think about, guys, you know, and this might not be a popular comment, but you know, we as a state have a lot of jobs that we require a national certification for. We use that across the human services field, right? That's what we do here with interpreters. We use two national, almost three national organizations that we say, hey, if you're certified through these, then you can work here in Connecticut, right? That's what we do. The other thing to think about is, if you don't believe that that criteria is being met, perhaps what you want to do is have people pay for a license here in Connecticut, where you set up your own standard of what an interpreter should have to meet to become an interpreter in Connecticut. Now, I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying that that might be one way to address it. And I will give you an example because I think it's important for people to understand. So when we started working on autism years ago, we did not even have a certification in place nationally or statewide for people that do applied behavioral analysis. Now, this is a specialized field that helps kids with disabilities privately and in the school system, right? Jeff's shaking his head because he knows what I'm talking about. So back in, I think it was around 2008, we met like we're doing here, and we decided, okay, we want to have a certification. At the time, we decided to go with a national certification, which all of the stakeholders agreed upon to have here in Connecticut. Fast forward in 2000 and I think it was around 2014 or 2016, we decided that it was becoming challenging for these providers to get paid in the human services field because they were not being recognized through the insurance system. So what we did was we came up with a state license. We used the national certification. And then once you have that, then you apply for a license here in Connecticut. It's been really successful. Now, having said that, there were people at the time that weren't happy that now we were charging for people to get a license here in Connecticut, but it went to the base of what is appropriate care for people in this state, right? And that's why we thought it was important. I will tell you that if you start to go down that path, which will be totally something that I think that you should bring up to the council, I mean, the advisory group, you know, to talk about, is this something that you see the need for in Connecticut? Remember this, licenses are not cheap. The ABA license, the last time I looked, is about $300 every 2 years, right? People might not be happy with that. We also may lose interpreters because of it. So when you start to think about standards and how do we grow this field, I'm just putting out there ideas of what we've done in the past in other human services areas. So Jeff is biting at the bit there to make a comment about it. So I will leave it there and I will open it up to Jeff.
No, I'm not going to bite. No biting here, I promise. However, I love the fact that you have considered this and that we're thinking out of the box. Licensure is a possibility. I mean, it's one way to go, and I'm open to that discussion. Now, okay, so in the field of deaf ed, so being a deaf person myself, I am trying to figure out what type of solution can we put in place for two things, for education. And the reason I mention education, because we have had the same issue for a long standing time. In the educational setting, law is not followed. Using certified interpreters within the school system when you have a deaf or hard of hearing student. What they're doing is they're using other individuals and putting them down as a communication facilitator. That needs to stop, period. No ifs, and or buts about it. I'm not sure if you in the lawmaking field can make this happen or not, but this needs to happen. Following an IEP, allowing them to use communication facilitators should not be allowed. I don't care. It is the deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind students' right to have full access to communication. So that is number one for me. The second thing I would say is that I know we've done a lot of work recently, especially with GYM and the hospital associations and so forth, and it's been great. I want to see that push be continued. I was in the hospital recently, I think it was about 3-4 weeks ago, for a personal reason. I don't mind sharing that I was there. My experience was awful. It was awful. Now, fortunately, because of my position, I was able to call ASD and have them send an interpreter because I immediately pink slipped the interpreter that was brought in. Now, I did not have that. I'm just trying to envision what other deaf individuals experience when they go into the hospital setting. So education and medical settings are my big issues that I want to make sure that we're confronting. I think, you know, can we do all of this without a formal observational board? I'm not sure, but those are my thoughts. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Jeff. I know that, you know, I want to give kudos to our two liaisons that are here from the Hospital Association, Jim and Karen. And I know that they have been meeting with individuals, part of this group and part of the advisory council for some time to try and work through this. So I do want to thank them for coming to the table. And that's why they wanted to be part of this group, because they wanted to continue this conversation. And I think that you're absolutely right. People of any disability should have the right when they have a need, whether it's hospital, education, law enforcement, someone that has an expertise should be there. So I totally agree with you there. And I know that they've been working on that with you guys. And I think that maybe what we'll do is in the December meeting, have them talk a little bit about what they've done to this point, because I know that they've been working behind the scenes as part of the hospital association to try and really talk about that. The educational piece, I wasn't familiar with that new term of the communications that they were using somebody with that title. So thank you for raising that. And I'm gonna put a call into SBE and find out what's going on. And I also, I have to tell you that I have a very good working relationship with, I represent Meriden, Berlin, and Kensington with both of my superintendents. So I always reach out to them first because they're the boots on the ground and say, okay, I'm hearing this is happening. What's really happening? Just like at our last meeting, we talked about wearing clear masks. So I called my superintendent and my special ed person and said, hey, your teachers, if they have a deaf child in the class, do they automatically wear a clear mask? Yes, they do. So that was great to know. Is that the norm across the state? Probably not. But it's things like that, guys, that I think are so important with this working group, because they may seem like common sense, right? Yeah, you're wearing a clear mask, you should be, right? But not everybody thinks about it. So, Jeff, I would be more than happy to look into this, and especially the educational, and find out how they're defining that and who they're using in those situations. So thank you for raising that. I think Marissa is next.
Hello. Can you hear me? Just making sure. Okay. Yes, I'm glad we're talking about accessibility in healthcare settings. And yes, I agree wholeheartedly that more access needs to be looked at. And I just want to specify that here at Disability Rights Connecticut, we work with many people with different disabilities. We work with people with developmental disabilities, people with traumatic brain injury, children, kids, people who are deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind, people who use speech technology to talk. And I would say that it is across the board an issue in trying to get readily available, accessible services from the hospitals, especially in the emergency departments. And I would also like to add that, some other states, I think Texas has done a study on this. I don't know, Connecticut's way of doing things, but if there was a study kind of focusing on medical accessibility, in this board, they worked across with Spanish interpreters, interpreters with other languages, people from other disability groups. And after this study, they came up with a great list of recommendations to the state on how to improve this. And I think that if this is, I would pose it as a consideration of maybe looking into that, just mainly even for medical accessibility. So thank you.
That's fantastic. So did you say Texas, Marissa?
Yes, I spoke with one of the people who were on the board, or on that study board. So I can look for her contact information and what she sent me. She says it's not privileged, it's not secret, like, hey, anybody who wants to look at what we've done already here in Texas, take a look at it, so I'm happy to share it.
Yes, if you could send that to Heather, then she can distribute it to the group. That's fantastic, rather than reinvent the wheel. Any other comments? Okay. Anything else Representative Abercrombie, that we would like to? Oh, I just want to mention that the December meeting is 3 hours that we've blocked off. Whether or not we need those entire 3 hours, I suspect we will, now that we've uncovered many little corners of these issues. So everyone is all set. We will give you 5 minutes of your day back. And thank you again to our staff at the General Assembly, Heather and Christina, who I don't see right now, but yes, thank you so much for your efforts and keeping us all in the loop and connected.
And thank you to our interpreters for being here. I know that Zoom is a little bit more difficult, but you guys have done a fabulous job, Anita and Kate. So thank you guys both. We really do appreciate it. And thank you to everybody that's here. We're all volunteering our time here because we think this is an important issue. So I really want to thank everybody for being here and for giving us your time, but also your expertise. I always say as policymakers, we come into this job and it's like being a parent. There's no rule book. There's no even education as it is on all of these issues. So being able to sit here with all of you and feed off of your expertise is really beneficial for us because our job is to represent you. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you for being here. Enjoy this beautiful day and this weather that we haven't had in a while. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you.